Yes, please. Assalamualaikum.
The policy of apartheid is...
Will you please introduce yourself first?
I'm Rashid Harvey from South Africa.
Yes. I know you, but I want the others to know. This is why. Yes, please. That's right.
The policy of apartheid in South Africa has been widely condemned by most nations. How should we as Ahmadis there play a part in the abolishment of apartheid, or should we not get involved with the politics of the land, even if it affects all the black people?
Now this is a difficult question to answer, particularly in public. My position is that of the international head of Ahmadiyya community in Islam, and as such, in this position, it is possible that my advice, which is carried into a regional controversy, may tend to make me appear parochial as well, which I don't want to. So there are two types of advices which can be rendered in this regard. Number one, in principle, I can tell you the Islamic teaching, how in principle, according to Islam, you should go about solving these problems. And number two, particular problems facing you as South African, there I should be excused to advise you in public, because if I start doing it, it may not lead me into problems here in this case, but in other cases, once the president is set, then it will be very difficult to maintain my neutral position as a world leader. You follow that point? And understand, I hope, yes. So as far as the Islamic teaching is concerned, Islamic way of registering protests, Islamic way of fighting one's cause is not exactly similar to the modern political ways we find in operation in various countries of the world. In the modern political fights, it is permissible to receive injury from one person and to pay back to another person. It is free for all. If a government is opposed to you, in the process of registering your protests in the normal politics, you are permitted to take your revenge from an innocent person. Burn out a car belonging to somebody who may not be at all a party to this dispute. Because you don't know, you just, playing havoc with the whole system, and you think unless you do that, the government will not be brought down to its knees. So this blind, revengeful policy is not at all permitted by Islam, and Islam wants Muslims to behave like adults and face the problems with greater wisdom and more application of the qualities of head and heart. How in detail that can be translated, this is a different question. But I know from the past history of Ahmadiyyat that Ahmadiyyat has always been taking part in struggles of independence on its own, in its own lifestyle. And the struggle of Ahmadis has always borne greater fruits, although more restrictions were applied to our policies and we had less leeway of action. And yet, if you read the history of Jamaat Ahmadiyya taking part in semi-political or entirely political movements, you will be surprised that the Ahmadiyya movement's efforts bore much greater fruits out of all proportion to the labor put in, because more wisdom was applied. Look, for instance, study the Kashmir movement. there were 100 times more Muslims in number who could serve the cause of the Kashmiri Muslims and who did attempt occasionally, but all their attempts were frustrated and did not bear any result. While a very small community, which as I told you in comparison was hardly 1% of the entire Muslim population, even less, when it started the movement, it brought down the British Empire to its knees. And the then governors of the Punjab had to contact the head of the Ahmadiyya community there in those days and to request them to come to negotiations and stop this movement. And as I have told you, we were guided by the Quranic principles. We did not kill any innocent people. We did not put buses to fire, put fire to buses or buildings. And the entire style of this movement was completely different from the normal political styles of the movements of those days. Later on, out of jealousies, Ahrar movement came to shoulder us out, and Allama Iqbal championed their cause. And because Ahmadis did not want to pick up any row on this issue, they had gone there with the spirit to serve, not to pick up quarrels with their own brother Muslims. So they withdrew without any row. And the Ahrar movement tried to employ the same modern means of political protests and rallies and things which were current in those days. And everybody knows, every historian knows, more than them all, Maulana Dost Muhammad Sahib, who is a specialist in the history of Kashmir nowadays, available with us. He knows the whole history, and if you are interested in finding out what happened to their movement as compared to ours, he will let you know. Yes? I mean, that's just for instance. Every time, in every phase of political struggle of Muslims in the subcontinent, whenever Ahmadis participated, they participated according to the rules laid down by the Holy Quran. And their movement was distinctly different from the other similar political movements. We participated in Muslim League for the creation of Pakistan, and although they had no limitations imposed, we had some, yet the historians, the non-Ahmadi historians, had to pay very high-flown tributes to us as Ahmadis, that they served the cause of Pakistan as no one else could. So when I say Islam imposes restrictions and yet it does not shackle your progress forward movement, I can establish it from the recent historic facts. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I am Tansi Ahmed from Kharagpur. And
You are son of Mirza Fazlur Rahman Sahib?
yes,
Yes. When did you arrive?
I'm Monday.
And what do you do there in Toronto?
I'm studying
What?
biochemistry.
Biochemistry, right?
When we say about that, we use the word ma'ruf. What is the meaning of this word in this time?
You Flower India pledge, you mean? Which pledge do you have in mind? Yes, sir. This word maruf is borrowed from the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran mentions this in connection with the pledge, the oath of loyalty taken by Hazur sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the ladies of his time. According to the Holy Quran, this word maruf was a part of that bay'ah, that initiation. And it was the Holy Quran which instructed that this word should be included in the word in bay'ah. Now, maruf does not impose restrictions on your loyalty to the person at whose hands you are getting initiated. In fact, it increases the liabilities. Why this word maroof was used particularly in case of ladies' bay'ah was that ladies, it was possible, there was a danger from ladies' side that they could say in ordinary dealings, in ordinary marriage ceremonies and this and that, where specifically the Holy Quran has not mentioned anything. There we are free. So our bay'ah does not include ordinary life pattern, the social pattern of our lives and things and that sort of thing. And they could say that we are free to do whatever despite our bay'ah at Awaan Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that is only limited to the strictly speaking religious affairs. So Allah knew all this could happen. So Allah told Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to include this word maroof, which means even in those things which are not strictly religious, but which are good in its sense, in essence. So in everything good, we will follow thee, even if that good is not specifically mentioned in the Holy Quran or laid down as imperative by Allah anywhere. So when we use this word maroof in the pledge of Khudam al-Ahmadi or Ansarullah, some people are mistaken. They think that this word maroof decreases their responsibility and liability towards Jamaat. They forget that it increases. It means that we will not raise questions about its being purely religious or not. If we are ordered about to do things, we will do them as long as they are good. That is to say, they are not contradictory to the teachings of the Quran. So there one can stop. But beyond that, even if a positive teaching cannot be found from the Holy Quran to support some particular order, the person who pledges this will have, according to his own pledge, will have to be obedient in every respect.
I have one more question.
Yes, please. Yes, please, you are allowed, of course.
Okay. Why do we reject the Christ miracle that he taught on the water, and he said in the Bible that he taught on the water, and that he walked on the water, but we represent like almost the same miracles to them.
I couldn't understand the second part of your question. Why do we reject, as I understand you, if I'm right then let me know, why do we reject the miracle of Jesus Christ to have materially, physically walked on water? Is that the first part of the question?
Yes.
What is the second part?
But we present almost the same kind of miracles to them.
We present almost the same types of miracle?
To them.
How? Do you? I have never done that.
I read from the book, I think it's from
Yes.
that once he was walking with Hazrat Muslim Maud,
Yes.
and Hazur asked him about a fruit. And
No, but that is not walking on the water.
no, but they were.
I'll come to that. You have asked a question which comprises two different regions and two different spheres in fact, and they have their own internal spherical laws to control them, and they are not transferable to each other. I'll explain that. The miracles of a prophet which are shown to the non-believers have a distinct category, and they have certain limitations imposed by the Holy Quran and the other religious books and the history of the prophets. And there are other miracles which are shown to the believers, not for the sake of making them believers, but to further enhance their belief in which they are already deeply rooted. And those miracles are shown to them to show them the limitless powers of the God in which they have believed. And these miracles have been shown by every prophet to a limited audience or limited spectators from their own people. So if such things happen and they are reported, the non-believers, the outsiders, are not bound to believe in them, because as far as they are concerned, there is no evidence. Today, if somebody produces an evidence in which there is no outside witness, you have every right to reject it. So the second type of the miracles are not binding upon the non-believers. If the Christians claim that this walking on the surface was displayed to all the non-believers and this was done so to make them believe, then we say that perhaps you have misunderstood that. Either it was a limited miracle only for the disciples of Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, or the miracle is metaphorical and you could not understand. It was in fact a vision, according to us, as far as the rest of the world is concerned. It was a vision carrying prophecies for the future. And Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, as far as Hazrat Muslim Maud perhaps, it is Hazrat Muslim Maud, or I don't remember exactly. If any Muballigh or Murabbi here remembers, he should help me when I state the whole thing. I have read it either in the books of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam or Hazrat Muslim Maud, that this miracle meant the mastery of the Christians over waters in future. Because the waters were made subservient to Jesus Christ, and it appeared that he walked upon waters to his own disciples, in fact. There was a great prophecy that in future the entire world power will be conquered through the mastery of the Christian nations over waters. So Christians would in future emerge as great naval powers. That was the prophecy, in fact. And again, in the same place, subject to rectification, whether it is Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam or Hazrat Muslim Maud. In Tazkira. Well, I am not very sure, but when you show me, then I will be sure. Yes. Yes. I mean, subject to that. The second part is that Allah has shown Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam that in the second advent, because this advent had to be more glorious, much more glorious than the previous advent, because the first advent was as a servant, as a subordinate of Hazrat Moses alayhi salatu wasalam, and the second advent was to be as subordinate of Hazrat sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So in that relationship, naturally, the second advent had to be more glorious. And in this regard, it is written that Allah had promised Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam that he would give his followers mastery over airs. Now, this is a very interesting situation we face today. The Christians seem to have mastery both over the seas and over the airs. So if this mastery over the air is promised to Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, that means it is something completely different from the present mastery over airs which we see today. Maybe the Ahmadis build new towns in the airs, or whole cities or continents are created in the air. Otherwise, this will not be called a mastery over the air by the followers of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. And also, this prophecy seems to be belonging to comparatively remote future. But what you can visualize from this would be much less than what would happen actually. Because the Christians of that time could not visualize what sort of mastery was in store for them in the future relative to that time. And they couldn't imagine what great naval powers would emerge even from a small island like the British Island. You know, they conquered the whole world through their supremacy in navy. And still, despite the age of Star Wars and everything, the importance of naval warfare as decisive factor in the future world war is not ignored by the great world powers. In fact, recently I read an article in a technical, authentic magazine from America, which disclosed that while we have been concentrating on Star Wars and rockets and things, constantly, without let or hindrance, the Russians have been improving their naval power, with the result that now they have got the edge over us. Just the Russians alone have got greater naval power now than the entire naval powers combined of European powers and America and so on. Why? Because Russia realizes that the future world wars may be fought in the heaven and in stars, etc., but the decision will be taken here on earth. And in that decision, Navy is still going to play the most important role. So whatever is left of the world after this great world war, which is pending and imminent, we don't know what may happen, but in the era afterwards, as predicted by the Holy Quran, inshallah, Islam, as presented by Ahmadiyyat, would rapidly spread. And a new phase will emerge in which a new type of mastery over airs would be given to the followers of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. Is this a common cap for everybody to use? Moreover, when you want to borrow somebody's cap, don't directly pick it from them. It is supposed to be a sign of insult. Huh? Please ask somebody to hand you over the... Okay. Was it yours he had taken?
No, it's not mine.
The way you did it, I thought it was yours. Yes, please.
My name is Khalid Pervez and I'm from Los Angeles, California.
Dr. Khalid Pervez.
USA.
Yes? What about that lawsuit against you?
Against me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
that you're neglecting some operation or something, and
I didn't see.
has it been resolved?
That has not been resolved.
Has it been resolved?
No,
Not yet?
28 was a...
But of course you are insured, I hope.
I am, and they sued me.
So why are you so much worried? I mean, it is the insurance company who should be worried.
If you record becomes...
Huh?
Records, your record.
I see.
Actually, I'm not going to lose it to somebody else's fault. So,
Quite. So what's your question now?
That disease going on in all over the world, especially USA, also called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency disease. Every day we hear on the TV in USA that from the East, especially the East, they come and they talk, not the medical doctor, the medical doctor says to the surgeon that this is only because people are having non-biblical practices, sex practices of practice. That's why this disease has come from the God to the people. And when somebody gets this disease, he is dead. Up to now.
You're talking about AIDS?
AIDS.
Yes, yes.
Nobody survived at this time. So how far do you think that female practices do we have to do with that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know about the non-biblical, but I know about the non-Quranic practices. which are naturally punished by Allah, generation after generation, and this is one of those. You know, when you become promiscuous in your sexual relationship to a point where there is no limit left, then what punishment awaits you in the future or in your family relationships, that is a different thing altogether. There is also a material punishment which is attached to this crime to occur as a natural phenomenon, as a natural consequence. And this we have been seeing in the past in the form of venereal diseases which are progressive. If a venereal disease appears, it seems to be a great source of misery for the mankind, and ultimately mankind is able to overpower it, and other appears which is as defiant as the previous one, or even more. Then when you think that you have ultimately done away with it, then a third one appears, even more horrible in some aspects. You know, at one time, gonorrhea seemed to be a most terrible disease, and much more than that, syphilis was considered to be the last word in the punishment in this regard. Later on, when the scientific progress is advanced in these regions, syphilis was more easily controlled through the use of penicillin than gonorrhea. Although gonorrhea played at that time less havoc with human beings than syphilis did, but syphilis was brought under control more easily than gonorrhea, and it continued. But later on, recent efforts, also brought gonorrhea under control, but from it emerged a different type of disease related to this, which is called herpes. I don't know the second part of it, it's not zoster, but herpes, which is related to venereal diseases. Herpes? Simplex. And genital? Both are called. Herpes genitalis?
Herpes simplex type 1, herpes genitalis.
Quite. There are two different types? Right. So these two herpes have replaced this punishment. And as far as my studies have revealed, they have not been able to find any remedy for herpes which could be considered as permanent cure. It comes and goes and comes and goes and never leaves you. And it's so painful and so torturous that sometimes it makes a person a total nervous wreck. And how they could tackle with it, they still did not know. While they were yet searching for an effective remedy against this type of herpes, there comes the AIDS. And this AIDS has sunken deeper into life forces. The fact is that the AIDS virus is very similar to parts of our defensive systems. And it sort of, acquires a disguise and sinks into the defensive system cells, either T cells or B cells, I don't remember, T cells. And it defies all efforts of the defensive system because it sits right in the middle, in the heart of the defensive system itself. And so far they have not been able to find an effective remedy for this. So what I mean to say is that the more promiscuous the society becomes, the more defiant it becomes. Nature, under Allah's command, is inventing new ways of punishment to the society. This is for those who do not believe in God. If you do not believe in God and you are left unpunished, then disbelief in God would spread even more rapidly. You will have no checks, no automatic brakes applied to the tendency to go mad after pursuit of pleasure and so on. So these are definitely in the category of punishments by nature. They say that this is an inherited, this is a disease, a historical thing, which was once attached to life, and suddenly, sporadically it has appeared. But when you look at the chain of events and the progressive punishment, then you have to realize and agree that it is not just a blind happening. It is an organized, progressive punishment from some being which is controlling it. And this punishment is related to our immorality. So in that much the Christian elders are right. I mean, whether they call it defiance of Bible or we call it the defiance of the Quran, ultimately it boils down to the same thing, that it is the defiance of God, in fact, which is inviting these troubles. Yes, please.
The melodious voice of the Muslim of this mosque is spread from most Saturdays and becomes a source of inspiration to prayer. Yet there are other Muslims who don't have such a melodious voice. Would it be against any principles of Islam to record the voice of a melodious Muslim on cassette and play the cassette all the time?
Well, as far as the use of cassette is concerned, it is to promote the Islamic injunctions, not to replace them. So in conjunction with human efforts, if it promotes our efforts, it's well and good. But they are not meant to replace human participation in the forms of worship. This is why I have never permitted the use of cassette of my khutbah instead of the imam. That somebody should play the cassette and say this is the khutbah being said, and that should replace the real khutbah. I have never permitted this, despite the fact that it was repeatedly suggested by some people from here and there. So this is my firm belief, that human participation and deep association with the processes of worship should never be permitted to be replaced by these aids. But these aids should promote those processes. So this is why when he comes to the microphone and records his voice, these help him carry the voice not only to a broader audience here, but also to America and to other continents. But that would remain Khaja Sahib's voice, and it would not replace your voice wherever you are. You see? Yes, please. Yes, please. Mr. Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Why God does not punish a person who claims to be God, but a person is punished if he claims to be a prophet?
Because to claim to be a God is so absurd and one is proved to be so helpless, totally helpless, that no sane man can believe in a person who claims to be a God. And if you are not sane, you are not punished. But those who claim to be gods earlier, while man's mind was not yet mature, and who did succeed in duping people and to deceiving them, they were punished. So the Holy Quran ushers us into a new era where it is a sort of prediction that from then on it is impossible for man to claim to be a God and for the other man to believe in such a claim to any seriousness. But prophets can come and claim to be prophets and they would be listened to, and there is a danger that even false ones would be taken as the righteous ones. Because in such a case, it is only Allah who knows whether he spoke to someone or not. So it is his responsibility to destroy such a person and not the responsibility of those who do not know. But earlier, like Pharaoh, who claimed to be a god, the Holy Quran tells us categorically that because of this claim he was destroyed. He never claimed to be a prophet. All right, fifth more question you mean.
What is your opinion about black holes? Are they mentioned in the Holy Quran?
Yes, very much so. I have mentioned it earlier in one of my question answer sessions. I pointed out the verse in which the black holes are mentioned. And yes, they are.
Can you?
They are a reality. Now, Hafiz Sahib, would you help me recalling that verse? Where is Hafiz Muzaffar Sahib? Yes. Just a moment. Let me first run my computers, to... यौम नत्फि समा कतई सिजिल लिल कुतुब कमा बदाना अव्वल खल्क़िन नुईदो वादन अलैना इन्ना कुन्ना फाइलिन. This is one of those verses which specifically mentions the process of black hole. Yawma natfi sama katayyi sijilli lil kutub is a beautiful description of how the black hole works. You know, the recent investigations have disclosed that when accretion from nearby stars begins to travel towards a black hole, which is a source of immense gravitational power, which you can't even imagine. I mean, the human mathematics is defied by the colossal power of that gravitation. It is to an immense order greater than the gravitational force known to us here on Earth. The result is that the internal pull of the particles becomes so great that star, which is the source, which ultimately is to become the black hole, it collapses on itself first, at the first stage. And when it collapses on itself, its volume has decreased and power has increased, because the power is directly related to the number of atoms and particles which it contains. And the volume is decreased, so that power is extremely concentrated now. It becomes so concentrated that the internal order of molecules and atoms also collapses on itself. The whole structure collapses, and it becomes comparatively much, much smaller than the previously collapsed star. Now the power remains the same, the sum total of the power, and the volume is so small that in fact it disappears from the view, so you don't know how small it is. The result is that in a small pinpoint maybe, entire force or gravitational force of a universe is concentrated. The result is that for many, many 100 light years or 1,000 light years, whatever matter is found around, it begins to travel towards that center of gravity. And as it approaches it, it goes through many transformations. But ultimately it falls to that center at the speed of light. And when it joins it, it is squeezed, adding strength and not adding volume. Because the strength it brings is so immense that the whole added mass is also squeezed into even a smaller size. So it is a vicious circle which goes on and on and on until a black hole mathematically is possible, which would eat up the entire universe and yet would be invisible, would be so small. What would happen to that mass, where it would have gone, and all that has not yet been visualized by the scientists, although many theories are put forward. But the Holy Quran not only mentions this black hole and its formation processes, but also mentions how this will be unwound again and the universe will be released later on. So the one verse which I have quoted describes the process of matter falling upon that black hole and ultimately being wound up. It says, "Katayis sajille lil kutub, yawma natvis sama," the day when we shall wrap up the entire universe. Katayis sajille lil kutub, like the rolling of a scroll by a scribe. In old days, the books were of a different form. They were scribed, written on rolls, scrolls. And whenever the scrolls were unrolled, people would read those books, and after that the scribe would roll them like this. So the Holy Quran says this process of disappearance of universe would be very similar to the process of rolling of a scribe of his roll, of his scroll. Now, the latest researches and computerized programs about what can possibly happen to the matter when it is traveling at the speed of light towards a black hole has been transformed into figurative language, and also color descriptions have been produced in the scientific magazines. And one is wonderstruck that it's exactly the same process as described by the Holy Quran. The scientists have mathematically proved it, that the matter which falls, it can never fall to the black hole in the form of a beam. When it gains speed, it spreads out and becomes a sheet. Invariably, without fail, it has to happen that the surrounding matter, when it falls, when it approaches the speed of light and also approaches the vicinity of that black hole, it is turned into a sheet. And because the black hole is revolving on itself, so the sheet is wound round that black hole like Katayyi Sajil lil Kutub. Fantastic how the Holy Quran 1400 years ago described this phenomena. How it would be unrolled again, this is a problem which is facing the scientists and for which they so far have not been able to give an answer. Because mathematically it appears to be impossible that overwhelming power which has engulfed the entire universe and swallowed it without even belching, it has got so deeply concentrated that it does not permit the light to be released, no sound can release, no other visible expression of nature is remitted from there. This is why it is called black hole. So the greater the mass of that black hole, the it works out, simply speaking, so the smaller the black hole would be ultimately because of increasing power. And more invisible it would become, and yet it would be much more powerful. So if it has gathered the whole universe around it, how would it ultimately release? What power would make it release? How can it happen? The Holy Quran tells us that in the last part of this verse, Kama badana awwala khalqin nu'idu. If you want to know whether the whole universe, the sama, has disappeared entirely for good or it will return to the form of existence as known to us, you should remember that we go on repeating the same thing over and over again. Like we created for the first time, we will repeat the same process again. So don't lose hope of the remote future existence. Don't think that once the black hole has eaten up everything, it would never release that energy again. Allah says, it was I who created, and I have the power to recreate, and I have been doing it from the times immemorial. So like I created for the first time this whole universe which you see, even if it has disappeared, I will recreate it. That further establishes our inference that the process described here is that of the black hole eating up the whole universe. Otherwise, why should Allah promise us that it will be recreated? That means it is disappearing. It is going into nothingness. So from nothingness, Allah would recreate it. The Holy Quran in another place describes that first process of creation. السماوات والأرض كانت السماوات والأرض رتقا كانت السماوات पहले क्या इन समावात ये करेक्ट ये भूल गए अवलम यरो अन्न समावात वल अर्द यही रतकन फतकनाहुमा अगला कुल्ला शैन है वजालना मिनल माए कुल्ला शैन है अफला युमिनून अवलम यरो अन्न समावात वल अर्द कानत समावात है अन्न समावात कानता रत्न अवलम यरो अन्न समावात वल अर्द कानता रत्कन फतकनाहुमा वजालना मिनल माए कुल्ला शैन है अफला युमिनून. This is the full verse in which the first process of creation is described. You haven't seen that the earth and the entire heavens at one time were like a tightly sewn up ball which would not release anything. Kanata Ratkan. Ratkan is in Arabic is like a khiddu. In Punjabi people know that khiddu, in which loose clothes, pieces of clothes are tightly sewn, and there is a seam of sewing which would not permit the sewn in commodities to escape. So that is the picture of Ratq. The Holy Quran tells us that there was a tight ball which contained something, which was Ratq, which was so tightly sewn that it would not release whatever it contained. For fataknahuma, which means that it also contained the heavens and also contained the earth. Everything which was to be earth in relation to heavens was in that ball, and the entire heavens were also in that ball. For fataknahuma, we ripped that ball open. And when that ball was ripped open by God, the whole process of energy release started suddenly, and that is the Big Bang, as known to the scientists as the first process of creation. They know that in the past there was a Big Bang about 20 billion years ago, when out of nothingness a big explosion took place, and they imagine it was a black hole which burst open. And so rapidly it released energy that at the speed of light the energy started flying out. And it is still flying out after 20 billion years ago. So the remotest parts of that energy are still running away from us. And we are also running in relation to each other from each other. And this process of expansion is continuing forever and forever. And the Holy Quran also describes that process. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. पहला क्या है? وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. That we have created with our own hands the heavens. And the process of creation is not which has come to an end. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. We go on expanding that creation. And this is wusat, that means go on increasing in size and volume. This Museun describes it to be a permanent process because the word Muse is ism and it has no tense. So it continues. That once we make the things begin to expand, then we will go on expanding them. And also it describes creation of new heavens in that process, because Museun also means not only just that things are gaining more volume, but that new things are being created in that process. So both these things have been observed by the scientists now, and they have become established facts. So once things have been wrapped round like a scribe, rolling his scroll, they would again be released by Allah, and they cannot happen, they cannot be released automatically. There has to be an outside power with greater strength than the inwardly pulling energy sources to rip that open, and once it is open, then the explosion is so great then that a new creation comes into being. And according to Allah, that has been happening forever and will continue to happen forever.
This is back up to such progress. We deal with Jehovah's Witness there and the operation, and some are so orthodox that they say that we don't need blood transfusion, and they come to emergency and they sign, everybody signs it. Okay, yes, for example, we don't want. And the person dies, and one mother dies, and children sue the doctor. But why you did not?
Yes.
Even if my mother give consent, and they want. We come in those situations, so doctors make judgment on it, say, we try to replace blood, blood replacement.
Replace what?
Blood replacements, like iron fluids, and colloids, which can bring the volumes more.
I couldn't follow this better, that part. Could you?
Blood replacement is that.
Genetics combined with other hydrofluids.
With hydrofluids, yes, you mean the synthesized?
Actually, not blood is iron fluid. Yes.
But synthesized material.
Synthesized.
That's right, yes, now I understand.
But that does not carry oxygen.
Quite.
So we can give that at a certain extent. So we get the patients sign that, and the 2 times happened that I have to give it, I gave it, and it's good now. So the patient gets to, so what's, advice, should we give it at the time, or should we hold it?
Well, this is something on which decisions have to be taken on the merit of the case. I mean, I can't give you one answer for all the possible things to happen to you in future. What I can advise you is to be cautious and try always to be on the safe side with dealing these people. The best policy is to do what they want you to do, or to tell them that here, that is the limit and I can't go beyond that. So go to another doctor. But if you want to keep somebody out of maybe interest in his fees or opportunity to gain some experience, whatever may be the reason, and want to compromise your principles with his principle, then you will always lead yourself into trouble, or possibly you may lead yourself into trouble. So the best advice I can render you is to play safe and play honest.
Actually, I was referring to the case it's not a private case, a paper case, and common.
It's a hospital case in which you have to deal with the case.
And
in that case, it is
indicated.
Quite.
And now, if given patient comes out.
In such cases, if a problem is expected, there is a danger of any patient posing certain problems to you, you can always submit a report in writing to your hospital authorities, apprising them of the situation and absolving yourself from the future responsibilities. By telling them that being a servant of the hospital, I'll do that according to the principles of the hospital. But such a patient does not agree with certain moral, ethical codes which we follow. So there is a danger of some clash, or there is a danger of his suing the hospital or me later on. So I want you to take decision. No, I don't want to take decision myself.
Maybe I put the question right here. It's a medically indicated, and medically you have to take decision gas.
Yes, if you take that medical decision medically and yet put it into writing and submit that decision in writing to your higher authorities, in future that will be safer for you. There is no harm in putting it into black and white and making a written statement that this is the situation I am facing and I have no choice but to follow this because it is my medical responsibility. Then if somebody sues you in future and you present that document that this was exactly what I had written down and submitted to the authorities and nothing has been altered from this situation, that would help you a lot in lawsuits. That's the maximum you can do there.
Yes, that's maximum I do that. I write a statement, let the patient sign that even if you say that you don't need it, I'm going to give it to you, medically give it. So because I'm here.
Yes, please.
And a few patients have come out and even then sued, that we were not in a good situation, at that time, we couldn't make any decision.
So in that case, I'm not going to decide, it's the court which is going to decide. Yes.
So I think, if the mother dies, and in the court, defending myself, that mother, that will be a little difficult, and defending the saving mother, I think that I give it, just on the basis.
Even if I rendered you a good advice, that will not help you in the court. Please. So, shall we call it a day? Now it's 5 minutes past 10. Maybe the answer is long. Because we have an experience of such things with Mr. Rashid Sahib, Abdul Rashid Chaudhary. Where is he? You remember that? Yes. Once he told me that I have two types of questions. One, long questions with short answers, and the other, short questions with long answers. So I don't know what sort of short questions you have. With a long answer or with a short answer? It will be, okay, it's a follow-up question, okay.
You mentioned that the universe is expanded. In Surah Al-Takbir, one of the verses says that the stars advance and then we free, we see.
That is a different thing altogether.
And
first of all, the stars are not mentioned there to advance and recede. Something advances and recedes. And the word star has been added by you. It's a different process altogether described, applying a different human situation. It has nothing to do with the expansion of the universe. Well, Jawar al-Kunnas, Jawar al-Kunnas से क्या है पूरी आयत? वसुबह इज़ा तनफ़्फ़स इससे पहले है. ला उक़सिमु बिल-खुन्नसिल जवारिल कुन्नस वल-लैलि इज़ा असअस वसुबह इज़ा तनफ़्फ़स. This is the verse you are referring to, which has nothing to do with this expansion of universe or anything of that sort. Please.